Welcome back to Built to Ship, the podcast where we go behind the scenes with founders and product leaders shipping real AI products into the world. I'm your host, Tyler Postal from Voker, and today I'm excited to be joined by Mike Wang, founder of Avina, the agentic GTM platform that helps you reach high intent prospects using AI agents and buying signals to automate outreach to prospects that are actually in market. Mike, it's great to have you.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Of course. Yeah, I'm excited to learn more about Avina. Why don't we start with your founding story? What were you doing before Avina? How'd you meet your co-founders? How'd you get the idea?
Yeah, for sure. So my current co-founder and I, we actually built another company together. So this is our second company. Our first company was an AI receptionist that we started out in grad school. So we met in grad school
Nice.
at Cornell Tech here in the city. Um, Cornell Tech, for those who don't know, is kind of like very entrepreneurial program. It's a master's program with business students and computer science students and design students all working together. We were very early on before they moved into their current beautiful Roosevelt Island campus. And it was like a really intimate kind of studio environment. Everybody was working together. Lots of people wanted to start companies from that. So we actually started our first company. We worked together on it as a school project and spun it out afterwards. So yeah, that was an AI receptionist. We ended up working on that for a few years, scaled it to hundreds of customers in the salon and spa space and the
Oh, nice.
general wellness kind of appointment-based space. Um, Ended up selling that business to MindBody.
Wow.
And yeah, and then worked at MindBody, continued to scale it and grow it out within the company. And yeah, throughout that entire process, just learned a lot about building, definitely building with AI. It's a very different environment back then when NLU, natural language understanding, was still a thing. LLMs have basically solved that entire space since then, but very different time. And we also learned a lot about just building a company, like scaling it, go to market, all the challenges besides, the engineering and product, which is kind of our main bread and butter. But there were obviously a lot of challenges to getting in front of the customers that we wanted to get in front of, messaging, positioning the product, and just having a repeatable sales motion that allowed us to scale. So yeah, those are a lot of the learnings that we took into this company. We wanted to help other companies reach their target market and position their products effectively with a focus on applying AI to making your outbound as smart as possible. So that's what we're currently working on.
Amazing. I love that you guys actually have, like, I think it's pretty unique to have a background in AI before LLMs, to have been working on this kind of product before. And it probably brings a ton of insights, like maybe that people today might not have, you know, been able to learn, because you had to kind of work through, probably a lot more challenges than they do today when it's coming, when it comes to building an agent or building an AI system. And I wonder how many of those are like applicable and helpful when it comes to LLMs, or how many of those learnings are just like irrelevant now that LLMs exist. What would you
Mm.
say? Anything that comes to mind in terms of like something that you think you wouldn't have learned if you hadn't, built a company before the LLM craze?
Hmm. Yeah. Um, yeah, I definitely have a huge appreciation for what LLMs can accomplish because I tried to do it all manually, and we had so much logic around it and very complicated architecture around like intent classification, named entity extraction, uh, you know, like conversational routing and things like that. Um, I would say, the main learning for me is that um, the the data is still king, like context is king, and the way that that kind of came about in our first iteration of this was we had to make it super domain specific for it to work well because there were just so many idiosyncrasies with kind of getting a natural language platform to actually do the things you wanted to do. That if you, back then, if you tried to boil the ocean and have an assistant that could kind of like interpret any request, it just would not work. Lots of companies tried to do it, and basically, no one could figure that out. So we were like appointments, salons, and spas, keep it domain specific, and that's what allowed us to really grow. And then kind of taking that to the current situation, it's different now because the language part is solved. But actually, what makes a product unique now is not necessarily the fact that you can interpret requests in a very open-ended way from unstructured input, but in order to, it's like one level higher, which is you want to accomplish a task for your user, make it really easy for them to, gain the right information, to analyze the right data, and have an output that actually is helpful. You still need for that to be, you still need to think a lot about the inputs into that system so that your output is actually good. Because it's not the language part that really makes a difference. It's are you solving a problem for your user? So yeah, I think that kind of like thinking about what the system actually accomplishes and making sure that pathway is working well is and has always been the most important thing.
That's great. Well, I want to dive a bit more into Avina. Tell us, like, I guess at a high level, we understand what the product is, but maybe what does it look like? The interface, is it, an agent that you chat with? Is it, setting up email campaigns? Give us a little bit about the product and who's the ideal customer of the product. And then I'd love to dig into some of the agent engineering behind the scenes.
Yeah, let's do it. So Avina is an agentic go-to-market platform. Essentially, we help companies reach leads that actually want to hear from them, and deliver relevant and timely messages. The way that works is kind of in 3 phases. So number 1, we help companies find leads. The kind of unique way that we do that is you can type out exactly what you're looking for in natural language. And then we have agents that connect to a bunch of different data sources and also just scour the web. So we deploy hundreds of agents that scrape data and call all the different AI web search providers and aggregate all of that data, qualify it. That's one way. And then the other way is through de-anonymizing inbound traffic. So visitors to your website, visitors to your blog posts. We track all that traffic, de-anonymize it, and then surface those as leads as well. So it's kind of like the outbound and inbound aspects of that. And then the second part of the funnel is we score and validate all of that data according to your ICP definition. So you're only getting the leads that you actually care about, and help you orchestrate that data into the right places. So that could be, pushing it to your CRM, delivering it to your Slack channels where your sales team is monitoring every day, or sending it to a webhook to do whatever you want with. And then the final piece of that is taking that data and actually automating actions off of it. So the main one is like automating outbound. So our AI takes all of that context from the signal, from the company research itself, and all past interactions that company has had with your website, with your emails, meetings, things like that, and writes an email that maps all of that information and creates this kind of like one-to-one pitch, basically, to that company. So yeah, kind of like the ultimate type of personalization there.
That's great. So it sounds like 3 main steps or 3 main aspects to the product. Now let's flip behind the scenes, across those 3 sort of features or phases of the product. What pieces are powered by agents? Where are places that agents don't make sense and it's still just kind of like, oh, it's traditional software? How do you guys think about that architecture overall? Do you have one agent that powers all 3 features, or are there specific agents for each? Walk us through the architecture at a high level.
Yeah, agents is kind of a loosey term. I think so. My kind of own definition of an agent is a system that passes data across between LLMs to go from input to output. Um, and you have agents. I think when most people think about agents, they think of like you're chatting with something. Um, when you have a service like ours, where a lot of the processes, a lot of what we're doing for our customers is kind of going on behind the scenes. So you tell us, I want to find companies that use Kubernetes in their production tech stack. Just hired a new CISO, have less than 200 employees, and are based in San Francisco. Right? You literally type that out. Um, what happens from there is we take that information, we break it out into the different um, kind of parameters that will go into search, whether that's scraping the web or going in as inputs and structuring those inputs into all the different data providers that we use. And uh, from there, it's kind of like a whole process of finding the data, crawling websites, um, qualifying that data, scoring it against your criteria. So, you know, that's not the same as like an agent that you chat with. Um, but you could consider that an agent in the sense that it's kind of autonomously processing your data, um,
Definitely.
and doing so in an adaptive way.
When it
So that
comes to those things you mentioned, like crawling sites or qualifying, like are each of those a different, like let's call it agent, because I agree, I would say that those are still agents. Even if you're not chatting with it, you're asking it to go take action, right? It's an AI system that's going and taking action or moving data from one place to another, like you mentioned. Um, how have you architected that? Like, are the web scrapers one type of agent with a different prompt and a different tool set, and you know, et cetera, or how does it work behind the scenes? What have you found to work well, and what doesn't work well when building? Like, sounds like a pretty complex system with a lot of different types of actions that need to be taken across different types of data. Like, crawling a site is very different than reading through context history of a specific opportunity or lead or account.
mhm,
How do you manage that?
yeah. Um, I for our use case, I prefer to think of it as kind of like modules, and you could call it agent if you want. It's kind of like semantics, but um, I the way that we leverage LLMs is more like I like to think of LLMs as like little programmable reasoning units. Um, so when we have our like web crawler, for example, um, there's like code that goes into that. There's a lot of just like you know reading the HTML on a page and structuring that HTML in a way that passes it into an LLM where you don't have where you don't have like 10,000 tokens that are just like garbage characters. So there's like pre-processing there, and then deciding how to route to the crawler to different pages. We're reading the sitemap, where we're reading what's on the links on the page itself, and then using LLMs as reasoning steps there to figure out like, okay, where should we go next? Um, and like interpreting that unstructured data in a structured way. But we've kind of defined all of those uh, points of reasoning.
Mm,
So we're controlling every step of the way, what is going into a reasoning step and what is coming out in a structured way, and then using that in code to kind of like orchestrate the next step, which may be programmatic or it may be passing that data to another LLM down the line. Um, so yeah, I guess you can think of that as like a specific kind of agent harness, where it's
yeah, it
not.
sounds like, would you say like this is accurate? It's kind of like uh, a programmatic workflow that has steps that are powered by LLMs, that has steps that are agentic. So you might
Exactly.
have certain parts that make a lot of sense. Like, okay, if you need to, cut down the amount of context you're about to pass into the LLM, you're going to do that with, programmatic methods. And then you feed that to the LM and it's making the decision, or it's the reasoning unit, like you mentioned, to decide, do I need to dive into another page, or do I need to use a different tool to process this data and then kind of move back to another programmatic workflow step. Is that kind of how it works across the different modules?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And one other thing I would call out there is, sometimes we have really simple decision points where we leverage an LLM. That could be as simple as like, here's 3 pages, pick the next one to go to, or maybe pick the top 5 out of these 10 pages, based on our goal. Or it could be like classify, like, here's the name of a country. Here are the 100 countries in the standardized format, like give me the standardized version of that country name. Those are like tiny little function calls. But we also have spots in the product where we have a single LLM doing a ton of reasoning all in one step, which is like, for example, the email generation part of it. To generate a great email, of course, you could just tell an LLM generate me a sales email for this recipient, and it's going to probably do a pretty bad job. And what makes the difference there is the data that you pass into it. So really crafting that context so it has everything that it needs to have, and that could be research on the company, research on the person itself, technographics, firmographics, touch points, past email threads that this person has had with you for that historical context. What are the news for that business, like other signals that we've gathered. And to get all that data into that right shape is like a series of steps that involve LLMs and just data engineering. So like summarizing it and condensing it. But that final step is a single LLM call. But it's like the culmination of all of that. So yeah, these LLMs are basically like reasoning functions, but they range from like tiny little helper functions to like this huge, important kind of holistic reasoning step.
I love that. It sounds like, using the right tool for the right job and not just, saying, oh, we're going to throw everything into a model without any sort of pruning or any sort of context engineering and just hope that it works. This sounds like pretty complex. Like you have multiple modules across different product features. You have different types of, let's call them reasoning units or agents, whether it's just a small processing step or a longer, reasoning system. How do you manage, like, how do you keep track, first of all, of like all of those different touch points? Do you, have versioning on the different prompts or the different agents, quote unquote? Do you have one place that you can see how they're all performing? Are they calls to LLMs just written, like hard coded into, different scripts and different parts of your backend? What have you found? Like, what would you advise people on how to manage like such a complex system with, it's not just one agent that they're throwing any type of task into that has 100 tools and it tries to figure it out itself. You've, purpose built each of these components.
Yeah. I would say that number one, we've built a lot of kind of utility functionality around these LMs. So like we have, just to get into the code a little bit, we have like a class that wraps a lot of this functionality and takes care of a lot of that kind of administrative stuff around running an LLM. We use this platform called FreePlay to track all of our LLM execution runs. And within that little plug for them, within that platform, you can also create data sets and test sets and gold standard sets and run evals and version your prompts. So we use them for our most important prompts, like the biggest ones that have the highest cost, have the highest, have some of the most important functionality to retain quality for our customers. But we don't have every LLM request going through that platform. So we kind of have just chosen the best, or the most important calls to really monitor and test. But I think we use LLMs in like 80 different places in the code, and probably like 50 of those we kind of just like have running. And I mean, we monitor the top level costs. But yeah, I would say, if I were to give advice to someone who's thinking about building a system like this, just do what's going to help you maximize your speed of development, and monitor your top level costs, but don't feel like you have to run evals and be super strict on like every single call to an LLM. Only we focus on the most important ones.
That's super insightful and helpful. Yeah, I think obviously in startup, speed is the name of the game. So taking that trade-off between testing, monitoring, etc., and makes sense if you have like an agent or a reasoning unit that's so specific and does such a small contained thing that you probably don't worry that it's gonna do something out of line, and you don't need to have a ton of tracking around that. Well, okay, I could keep asking you all sorts of questions, but we're at time. I want to put your website up on the screen real quick. It's Avina, AVINA.io, the agentic GTM platform to reach high intent prospects. And maybe Mike, tell us a bit about how do people follow along? How do they try out Avina? Who should check it out?
Yeah. Thanks. If you want to check out Avina, just visit our website at avina.io, and it's free to use. So we have a 14-day free trial with a good amount of credits. So feel free to poke around, and our lowest plan starts at $150 a month. So we're really trying to make this accessible for even people who are kind of just experimenting with this data. We think that signals is kind of well known across the industry as something that teams, even huge companies, need to implement to get their sales intelligence and outbound to be smarter. But for startups who are looking for a way to leverage this intelligence without needing to pay $80,000 a year for some of these more hefty tools, this is a great way to get started. But yeah, so in terms of the folks who find the most value in Avina, I would say it's founders who have started to sell and need a way to scale their outbound, but don't want to spend days and hours, managing a bunch of tools in integrations and writing, email sequences from scratch. You can get this whole engine going with Avina. And then second, for teams that are selling at scale and have teams of SDRs that know what to look for in the market. So if you know exactly, what types of companies you want to target, you can, again, just search for those in Avina. And so you can get very precise with your targeting and just get an engine going really quickly.
Amazing. Mike, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate you sharing all the learnings that you guys have had across multiple different companies, building before LLMs were a thing, and after. I'll have to have you back on the pod in the future to hear how everything's going at Avina. But yeah, appreciate your time.
Yeah, this was fun. Thanks, Tyler.
Of course. And to everyone listening, thanks for listening to Built to Ship. If you're building something, go ship it, and we'll see you next time.